He was just 6 years old. One moment, he was laughing and playing with his brother and friends on a mountain meadow in the Great Smoky Mountains. The next, he was gone. No scream, no struggle, just gone. It was Father's Day weekend in 1969, a family tradition. Dennis Martin, a bright, playful boy from Knoxville, Tennessee, had gone camping with his father, Bill, his grandfather, Clyde, and his older brother, Douglas. They chose Spence Field, a scenic, high-altitude meadow nestled deep within the Smokies, a place the Martin family had hiked for years. Dennis was the youngest in the group. He had curious eyes, a quiet but adventurous spirit, and a bashful smile that made everyone around him soften. He loved the outdoors. He loved being with his dad. His parents described him as gentle, observant, and full of quiet energy. He wasn't the kind of kid to wander off on his own. Not in a place like this. The Martins had arrived at Spence Field after a long hike. The weather was warm, the air still, and the view from the ridge stretched across endless layers of green hills and blue mist. It was the perfect weekend getaway moment to unplug, to connect, to share stories under the trees. And for a while, it was just that. Later that day, as they rested and chatted with another family they met along the trail, the children hatched a plan. They were going to sneak around and scare the adults as a joke. Dennis smiled shyly and joined in. The others ran around one side of the clearing. Dennis, being smaller, chose to circle around the back, near a thick patch of brush. It was just a game. But Dennis never came out the other side. He had vanished, as if the mountain had swallowed him whole. At first, no one panicked. Bill Martin, Dennis's father, called his son's name casually, expecting the boy to leap from the brush with a giggle, but there was no sound. A minute passed, then another. The smile on Bill's face faded. He stepped toward the edge of the thicket and began calling louder. Dennis? Still nothing. He checked the spot where Dennis had entered the brush. No footprints, no rustling leaves, no sign of movement. The boy had disappeared in less than 5 minutes without a trace. Bill Martin's voice rose with urgency. He sprinted through the bushes, scanning the surrounding woods. He called his son's name again and again, his voice cracking. Within moments, the calm of the afternoon collapsed into a rising dread. It was 4:30 p.m. when Dennis was last seen. The weather was warm, but clouds had started to gather on the horizon. The family split up and began combing the area. They shouted, whistled, searched under rocks, behind trees, even down into gullies. The other family joined in. Still nothing. At 5 p.m., Bill made a decision. He left Douglas and Clyde behind and ran 3 miles down the Appalachian Trail, straight to the ranger station at Cades Cove, desperate to find help. The search began almost immediately. Park rangers returned with Bill, and the first sweep of the area was done before nightfall. Flashlights cut through the darkening woods. Voices echoed through the trees. Rain clouds pressed low, threatening to make everything worse. And then, just after night settled in, the sky broke open. A torrential downpour began washing over the trails, flattening grass and turning dry forest paths into streams of mud. The temperature dropped rapidly. In just a few hours, 3 inches of rain fell over the Smoky Mountains. If Dennis was out there alone, afraid, soaked, he was facing not only the darkness, but the cold. And for the searchers, the rain was catastrophic. It erased footprints. It dampened scent trails. It silenced the forest. That night, Spence Field, once filled with laughter and sunlight, became a nightmare of shadows and water. The mountain was quiet again. And Dennis Martin was still gone. By morning, the mountain was crawling with people. What had begun as a simple family camping trip was now a full-blown emergency. The National Park Service initiated an official search and rescue effort at sunrise. Rangers combed the trails. Volunteers poured in from nearby towns. The U.S. Army sent a team of Green Berets. Helicopters hovered overhead. Search dogs arrived but struggled with the scent, likely washed away by the heavy rain. The operation grew into one of the largest and most expensive in national park history. More than 1,400 people, participated in the hunt for Dennis Martin over the coming days. The rugged terrain was divided into grids. Men moved in long lines, shoulder to shoulder, calling Dennis's name. Others checked caves, ravines, and stream beds. Every inch of Spencefield and the surrounding wilderness was covered. But something was wrong. Despite the massive scale of the search, not a single clue emerged. No scrap of clothing, no shoes, no blood, no broken branches, nothing. It was as if Dennis had evaporated into the forest. Searchers reported hearing strange noises in the wood slow growls, distant crashing, but nothing they could track. One man swore he saw movement in the trees, but when they investigated, it was empty. Then came a report from a family hiking several miles away, in a place called Rowan's Creek. They had no idea a child was missing. But that afternoon, the very same day, Dennis Vanishaden, member of the group, Harold Key, saw something strange. From a distance, he claimed to see a rough-looking man, barefoot and disheveled, darting through the woods. But it wasn't the man that caught his attention, it was what he was carrying over his shoulder. Something small, something limp. He assumed it was an animal. Later, after hearing the news, he realized it may have been something else. Harold reported it to the authorities, but the detail was buried in paperwork, overlooked in the chaos. Others came forward with similar stories. Some described hearing a scream, others a low moan carried by the wind. But nothing led to Dennis. Every lead hit a wall. Every day ended the same way, with no trace. Dennis Martin had vanished. And now, the Smoky Mountains were refusing to give him back. The story of Dennis Martin swept across the country like wildfire. By the end of the third day, national news stations were broadcasting live from the trailhead. Headlines screamed across newspapers. Boy vanishes in National Park. Television anchors stood at the edge of the woods, describing the hopeless terrain. The Appalachian wilderness, once seen as a place of beauty, had turned into something dark and unknowable. Reporters circled the family like vultures. Microphones were pushed into faces, still wet with tears. Speculation filled the void where facts refused to appear. The Martins were shattered. Bill Martin, once strong and proud, aged a decade in a week. He stayed in the forest for days without rest, refusing to leave until Dennis was found. He walked mile after mile, through mud, over ridges, sleeping in his clothes, his voice hoarse from shouting. He'd stop hikers and hold out his son's photo. "Have you seen him? Please, have you seen him?" His wife, Oletta, remained home in Knoxville, watching the news with hands clasped tightly, hoping to hear a miracle. But there was none. And the longer the search dragged on, the more chaotic it became. Volunteers stepped on potential clues. Scent trails were destroyed. Tips poured in from across the country, many of them absurd psychics, rumors, even accusations. One woman claimed she saw a boy matching Dennis's description playing in a hotel pool in Mississippi. Another swore she saw him in a shopping cart in Texas. Each new call rekindled hope. Each one proved false. Within 10 days, the official search began to scale down. The helicopters left, the soldiers were recalled, the cameras moved on. But Bill Martin stayed. He couldn't leave the forest that had stolen his son. Couldn't leave without knowing. He stood at the edge of Spencefield for hours at a time, eyes locked on the tree line, waiting for a boy who never came back. He later told reporters, "It's like a hole opened in the world, and he just fell in." The Park Service gave no answers, only theories, and even those were thin. They said Dennis may have gotten lost, may have fallen into a ravine, may have been taken by a wild animal, but maybe wasn't enough. And to the Martin family, none of those theories made sense. Because Dennis Martin didn't just disappear. He was erased. In the absence of answers, speculation took root like ivy. At first, the official explanation was simple. Dennis had wandered off, gotten lost, and succumbed to the elements. It was tragic, but believable. But the more people looked, the less sense it made. Dennis wasn't careless. He wasn't impulsive. He was cautious by nature. His parents had drilled safety into him: never go far, never go alone. And even if, by some unlikely impulse, he had wandered away, where were his footprints? Trained trackers, including elite Green Berets, combed every foot of that forest. These were men who could follow the trail of a rabbit across stone, and yet no prints, no disturbance, no trace. Even stranger was the terrain itself. Spencefield is a high meadow, surrounded by steep drops, thick forest, and rocky ledges. For Dennis to have left unnoticed, he would have had to cross brutal terrain, silently and alone, in minutes. And then there was the rain. The storm came just hours after Dennis vanished, dumping over 3 inches in a single night. Experts later said that even if Dennis had survived the fall or exposure, the cold and wet likely would have taken his life within hours. But again, no body, no clothing, no trace. Search dogs couldn't pick up a scent. Not on the field, not in the forest, not even on his discarded belongings, because there weren't any. Which brought investigators back to the most chilling possibility: someone had taken him. The story Harold Key told of a barefoot, filthy man sprinting through the forest, carrying something, was largely ignored at the time. Officials said the timeline didn't line up, that Rowan's Creek was too far, that it wasn't relevant. But locals weren't so sure. Some hikers whispered of wild men living off-grid deep in the Smokies. Survivalists, outlaws, people who vanished into the woods decades ago and never came back. Others spoke of older stories, Appalachian folklore, dark and unrecorded, creatures that stole children, spirits of the forest, watchers in the trees. The Park Service refused to entertain these theories, but the Martin family did, because what else was left? As the years passed, the case stopped being a search. It became a riddle, and Dennis Martin became more than a lost boy. He became a symbol of what the mountains don't give back. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months, and still nothing. The official search for Dennis Martin ended after 2 months, quietly, without ceremony. No discoveries, no evidence, no closure. Just a brief announcement. The case would remain open, but there were no further leads. The Martin family refused to accept that. They returned to the Smokies over and over, walking the same trails, staring into the same dense woods where their son had disappeared. Bill Martin hiked for hours, every time he came, always alone, always scanning the tree line. He searched for bones, for clothing, for answers. But most of all, he searched for a reason, something to make sense of it all. He became obsessed with the maps, with timelines, with elevations and rainfall charts. He reread witness reports until he had them memorized. He even reached out to retired rangers, pleading with them to revisit their notes. Nothing helped. The family placed flyers, talked to reporters, followed every rumor, even the far-fetched ones. Someone claimed to have found a child's shoe in a cave in North Carolina. Another said Dennis had been seen hitchhiking years later, older but silent. Each tip fizzled into dust. Over time, people began to move on. The public forgot. The headlines faded. Park officials stopped returning calls. But the Martins didn't stop. Because how do you stop looking for your child? Bill Martin aged rapidly. His once square shoulders slumped under the weight of years without closure. Friends said he rarely smiled anymore. His voice, once loud and direct, became soft and worn. He once told a local reporter, "I just want to know. I don't even need justice anymore. I just want to know what happened to my boy." But the forest never answered. There were no remains, no bones, no closure. Just empty trails and the soft sound of wind through the trees. As if the mountain had taken something and chose never to return it. Time did not bury the story of Dennis Martin. It twisted it. In the years that followed, whispers began to spread not just in Tennessee, but across the country. The boy who vanished in plain sight. The child the mountain kept. Dennis became more than a name. He became a myth. Stories emerged on internet forums, late-night radio, and around campfires in the Smokies. Some claimed Dennis had been taken by a wild man, a feral human, living in the caves and hollows, invisible to civilization. The theory gained traction when former park employees admitted, off the record, that there had been unexplained sightings of strange, barefoot figures deep in the backcountry over the years. Others told darker tales, that Dennis had stumbled upon something he wasn't meant to see: a military operation, a cult, or something unspoken and had been silenced. One theory resurfaced with disturbing consistency: the man seen by Harold Key, the one carrying something limp on his shoulder. The National Park Service had long dismissed the account, but independent investigators pointed out that the spot where Key saw the figure was just over a ridge, a few miles from Spence Field as the crow flies. Could someone have taken Dennis and escaped through those woods before the rain? Was it possible the boy had been moved long before search teams even arrived? There were more bizarre ideas. Some claimed the area was cursed. Others blamed cryptid strange creatures like Bigfoot, or entities from Cherokee legend that supposedly guarded the mountains. Even experienced rangers admitted, privately, that the Smokies have secrets. They're older than we are, one said in an interview decades later. Things happen out here that we don't talk about. Things that don't fit. The truth, whatever it was, remained buried. No bones, no clothing, no final moment. Just silence. And a 6-year-old boy who walked behind a bush and never came back. Bill Martin never stopped searching, even when the headlines vanished, even when the park rangers rotated out, even when people began to treat Dennis like a ghost story. Every year, around Father's Day, he returned to Spence Field. He hiked the same path, Saturday in the same meadow, listened to the same silence. He brought new maps, new questions, new hope, however faint. But the forest never changed. The place where Dennis vanished remained untouched. The trees stood the same, the air held the same stillness, and every time Bill left, he carried the same weight back with him. People asked how he endured it. He never had a real answer. It's not about endurance, he once said. It's about being a father. He grew old in the shadow of the unanswered. His hair turned white. His hands shook when he held photos of his son, but his voice never wavered when he spoke about that day. He recounted every detail like it had happened yesterday. He remembered Dennis's laugh, the way he held his hand, the last time he saw him smiling, running behind a bush, just playing a game. Then gone. Oleta, Dennis's mother, suffered in quieter ways. She stopped speaking to reporters. Her grief turned inward. She rarely left the house. To her, Dennis never became a myth or a theory. He was her little boy. As time passed, the family endured another kind of loss, the erosion of memory. People forgot. New generations of hikers walked those trails with no idea what had happened there. Spence Field became just another pretty view. But to the Martins, it was sacred and haunted. Eventually, Bill passed away. He died never knowing what happened to his son. But he died having kept a promise. He never gave up. No one has ever been charged. No body has ever been found. No official cause of disappearance has been determined. Dennis Martin remains listed as missing. His case is still open. His photo, faded and grainy, still appears on a corkboard at a ranger station deep in the Smokies. A boy in red, frozen in time. A reminder that some stories never resolve. That some wounds don't scar over. That some forests don't give back what they take. There are mysteries that hide in the shadows. Then there are those that stand in daylight, right in front of us, and still, we cannot explain them. Dennis Martin's disappearance isn't a ghost story. It's not folklore. It happened. A real boy, in a real place, surrounded by real people gone in seconds. And yet, everything about it defies logic. There was no sound, no struggle, no trail, no evidence, only silence, broken by desperate voices, and the sobbing wind. If Dennis had wandered away, why did no one see him? If he had fallen, why was there no sign? If something took him, how did it move so fast, so quiet, through one of the most monitored forests in America? And why has no one ever found anything? Not a shoe, not a piece of fabric, not a bone. The Great Smoky Mountains are beautiful and brutal. They hold secrets beneath their mist, secrets older than the trails, older than the people who hike them. To this day, the name Dennis Martin lingers in that wilderness. Park rangers still know the story. Locals still tell it in hushed tones. Some say they feel a presence at Spencefield, not something frightening, just unfinished. Every year, someone asks, do you think he's still out there? And maybe, in a way, he is. Not in body, but in memory, in the mystery, in the question that never found its answer. Dennis Martin didn't just vanish. He became a reminder of how fragile we are, of how easily the world can shift, of how even in the most watched places, something can slip through the cracks. There are mysteries that hide in the shadows. Then there are those that stand in daylight, right in front of us, and still we cannot explain them. Dennis Lloyd Martin disappeared on the 14th of June, 1969, during a family camping trip in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee. He was 6 years old. This isn't a story pulled from fiction or folklore. It's documented in National Park Service records, FBI reports, and covered by major outlets like the New York Times and Associated Press during the late 1960s. You can find archived news clippings and FBI case files by searching Dennis Martin Missing 1969 site, nps.gov. Dennis Martin Case Great Smoky Mountains FBI file. His father, Bill Martin, ran over 3 miles to a ranger station at Cades Cove after Dennis vanished behind a bush during a simple game with other children. Within hours, a storm rolled in and erased any trace, a detail corroborated in dozens of official reports and witness interviews. The resulting search became one of the largest in U.S. history, involving over 1,400 personnel, including the U.S. Army Green Berets, bloodhounds, helicopters, and grid-based combing of more than 56 square miles. But no trace was ever found. No shoes, clothing, or remains. A controversial lead involved Harold Key, a man hiking with his family several miles away, who reported seeing a rough, unkempt man carrying something over his shoulder. His sighting is documented in the case notes, but was downplayed by park officials at the time. Over the decades, the Dennis Martin case became a lightning rod for speculation, feral humans, abduction, cover-ups, folklore, tales of creatures in the Smokies, and criticism of how national parks handle missing persons, explored in David Paulides' controversial book series, Missing 411. Despite all theories, the case remains officially unsolved. Dennis Martin is still listed as missing by the National Park Service. You can read more at OSLA's National Park Missing Person Database, nps.gov. Missing 411, Eastern United States by David Paulides, investigative book, Knox News Archives. 50 years since Dennis Martin vanished. To this day, no evidence has ever surfaced. No closure, just questions. If this story struck a chord with you, share it. Keep Dennis's name alive. Because somewhere, someone knows more than they've said. And some mysteries don't fade, they wait. Thank you for watching. Some stories don't need endings because they never truly ended. Dennis's disappearance isn't just a case file. It's a 6-year-old boy. A father still running through the trees in his mind. A family still listening for a voice that never came back. If this left you with more questions than answers, good. That means you're paying attention. Here, we don't offer simple explanations. We follow the traces left behind, even when they lead into the dark. Comment If you felt something today, share it, comment, keep the memory alive. Because silence is how stories disappear. And this is Unsolved Vault. See you in the next case.